So we're in the sixth story of David, and it covers from 2 Samuel chapter 11 all the way to the end of the book in chapter 24. You need to go read it because it covers a lot of information. But before we go into the story, I want you to keep in mind that the Bible is descriptive. It's not prescriptive. This is going to be the hardest chapter for us to listen to. And I want you to keep that in mind as we listen to this section about a shepherd king who suffers the consequences of his disobedience. And this is the true story we're told. So when the kings would go off to war, David stayed back and didn't go. And one day he was up on the roof and he looked out and he saw a beautiful woman in the distance bathing. And he commanded that she be brought in to him, and he slept with her, and she became pregnant with a child. Now, her name was Bathsheba, and she was the wife of one of David's mighty men, Uriah. And when he found out that she was pregnant, he plotted to have Uriah killed. He commanded that his military leaders put him in the battlefront, so that he would be murdered. David then married Bathsheba and made her his 8th wife. Well, the prophet Nathan came to him and he told him, David, there's this guy that he has a whole field full of sheep. And he went and he took the only sheep from this man. And it's the only one he had. And David, in his rage, just cursed and said, that man needs to be killed. And the prophet said to him, David, you are that man. Well, David repented and confessed that he had sinned against God. And so the prophet told him, God has heard your prayers, but you need to know the child will not live. And the child ended up dying. David went to Bathsheba and he comforted her, and they ended up having a second child, and they named him Solomon, and the Lord loved him. Now, the choices that David had made in having many wives ended up having an effect on his family. And one of his wives had a son named Absalom and a daughter named Tamar. Tamar was beautiful. The son of another wife, Amnon, really wanted Tamar. So much so that he listened to the plot of a friend and getting her to come and care for him. And when she showed up, he sought to rape her. She tried to reason with him, but he wouldn't listen. And once he raped her, he hated her. Now, David did nothing about what happened to Tamar. He did not protect her, and he did not discipline Amnon. And when Absalom heard about this, he was in a rage because of what happened to his sister. Couldn't believe that his brother would do that. And so he plotted to have Amnon killed, and he succeeded. David again did not discipline his son. Now Absalom fled off to go live with an uncle in another place, and David let it go. He didn't do anything about it. And he lived there for 3 years, and David grieved the presence of his son. And after time, he ended up bringing Absalom back in and had him brought back to the palace. But with his presence, he never tried to reconcile or restore the relationship. He did nothing about it. He just allowed him to be present, but distant. And that had an effect on Absalom's heart. And he began to plot against his dad. And he plotted to take the kingdom from him. And he started gathering and building an army. And eventually he got built up enough that he determined to rebel against his father, and he was going to take over the kingdom. And when David heard about what happened, instead of staying and protecting the nation of Israel and disciplining his son, he fled from Jerusalem. And this caused an incredible civil war to happen. And he told his leaders, don't hurt my son Absalom, because he didn't want to hurt his son, but yet he had a rebellion against the kingdom, and he was called to be the shepherd of the people. And on that day in particular, as the war was taking hold, it is said that the forest devoured more men than the sword, because as David's mighty men were fighting against the nation of Israel, they were taking hold and overtaking them. And 20,000 men died in the forest that day. And one of them was Absalom. He had ridden into the forest on his donkey, and his hair ended up getting caught in the branches of a tree. And the donkey kept going, and the hair caused him to be hanging from the tree as David's mighty men came in and his commander. And he picked up his javelin and he stabbed Absalom in the heart. And his armor bearers ended up finalizing and killing him. Well, when word got back to David, he grieved over his son. He didn't celebrate the victory that Israel won. He mourned his son. And he didn't do what kings would normally do and sit at the gate to welcome the men back after victory. The commander went to David and said, "You are shaming your men when they have been victorious in defeating the rebellion. You go out and welcome them." And so he did. He went and sat at the gate. And the people were told, and they passed by him that day. But they didn't feel the victory. It just kept spiraling. The kingdom kept having problems from that point forward. And a famine occurred, and that was weakening the state of Israel. And then one battle, they went out to fight against the Philistines, and they won. And instead of doing what God commanded, David knew he was not supposed to count. He decided to do a census. And this brought the Lord's anger on David and the nation of Israel. And God gave him a choice that he could make a decision of 3 things to determine what would happen to the nation because of his decision. And David said to God, "I would rather fall into your hands than into the hands of man by their sword. So let us die by your plague." And for 3 days, a plague swept across the nation of Israel, killing 70,000 people. David on the 3rd day built an altar and repented, and he said, "I am the shepherd. These are the sheep. They're my sheep. It's my fault. It's my sin. It's not theirs." And God heard his prayer and stopped the plague that day, and it ended. May God honor the telling of his word. This is why it's important to be in the word, so that we can be with Jesus, so that we can be transformed. Shalom.